Okay, we're live. Aloha and good morning, stakeholders in person in the WebEx, and members of the public that may be watching through our YouTube account. My name is Andrew Okabe. I am a utility analyst at the Hawaii Public Utilities Commission. The commission requested that Hawaiian Electric coordinate and facilitate this very status update meeting in order to discuss with stakeholders on the transfer of equipment needed by stakeholders to meet Hawaiian Electric's 10-year goal to resolve the double pole backlog. Again, the commission stresses that this meeting is necessary to obtain information from all stakeholders prior to a progress report due to the legislature ahead of the upcoming 2024 session to fulfill House Concurrent Resolution 41 request of the commission. Following a brief set of introductions, I will cover ground rules for this meeting and then hand off to Hawaiian Electric for their presentation. Let's go over some introductions from the commission. First, our chair and the commissioners. Chair.
Morning, Leo Sanchez, Chair of the PUC.
Morning, Naomi Kauai, Commissioner.
Good morning, Colin Yost, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Now to commission staff. Max.
Hi, everyone. I'm Max. I'm an economist at the PUC. Anand Samtani, economist.
Morning, I'm Grace Ruff, the Chief of Policy and Research.
Any staff online on the WebEx? Apologize, we're trying to sort some technical issues with our speaker from the WebEx. Give us 1 or 2 minutes. Okay, so I assume that someone from WebEx, any commission staff that would like to introduce themselves on WebEx, I apologize.
Hey, Andrew, did you mention me? Jason.
Okay, let's go over to the stakeholders. The rest of the stakeholders in the room, and then we'll do round robin, and then we'll go online as well. Let's start, I guess, from the end here.
Rebecca Lieberman, Charter.
Mitchell Miyoshi from Charter.
Elizabeth Songbele, AT&T.
Rich Van Drunen, Hawaiian Electric.
Paul Nakagawa, Hawaiian Electric.
Lisa Swan, Hawaiian Telecom.
Dan Masatomi, Hawaiian Telecom.
Mike Angelo, consumer advocate.
Mickey Knox at the Consumer Advocate.
And folks on the WebEx, stakeholders on the WebEx, and please introduce yourselves.
David Collier, AT&T.
Charles Stanton, AT&T.
Verizon.
Kevin Katsura from Hawaiian Electric.
Andrew Nojiri from Hawaiian Electric.
Donna Barrett, Verizon.
Michael Bagley, Verizon.
No, Grotson, Verizon.
I'll go over. I apologize for cutting you off. Thank you for that. Let's now go over some ground rules. First of all, please be respectful to other stakeholders in this meeting. Commission staff may interject as needed during this meeting to drive discussion. I ask that all stakeholders raise their hands to ask questions, including use the raise hand feature on WebEx for those on WebEx. Questions during the meeting should come from live stakeholders and WebEx participants who are stakeholders and staff from the CA and the Commission. I ask that all other persons who have questions or comments, such as members of the public, to submit them through the Commission's public comment process by referencing double poll removal. Public comment can be submitted to the Commission through written comment sent to the Commission postal mail address in person at the Commission's office or online through the Commission's e-services page. I have a stack of half sheets in the front of the room to guide the public through this process if they so choose. The exits are to the back of the room on each side of the hearing room. The bathroom codes, the bathroom is located in the basement and the bathroom codes is located on the door to the Malka side of the hearing room. And now we'll begin with Hawaiian Electric. Thank you, Hawaiian Electric. Yep. And I'll put up the presentation right now.
Okay. Good morning, commissioners, consumer advocates, stakeholders. I wanted to go over our double poll removal status report. We do have 7 agenda items. I can show you the agenda on the next slide. Okay. So starting off with agenda item 2, we'll be going over the highlights of our double poll removal update report that we presented to the commission on October 27. We did have a meeting with the commission staff on Thursday, October 19th, and we followed up with a report. Agenda item 3, we'll be going over the responses to the questions from the commission distributed on November 30th. So it'll be a high-level summary of questions and answers. I think questions 1 through 17. Agenda item 4, we'll be going over any questions from the consumer advocate, the commission, and the stakeholders regarding our responses. The questions 1 through 15. And then agenda item 5, similarly, we'll be going over any questions regarding questions 16 and 17 of the questions and answers that were submitted back to the commission. Agenda item 6, we'll be going over our plans to modify our current process, procedures, and entertain any questions on what we are proposing to do to achieve our goal of removing double polls within the next 5 years, backlog of double polls within the next 5 years. And finally, agenda item 7, we'll be going over any questions from the CA, the commission, and stakeholders regarding our proposal to modify the process and procedures. Okay. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. First, we wanted to just do a high-level definition between an owner, a renter, and attacher. We'll be using these terms interchangeably throughout our presentation, as well as in our responses that we provided. So we define an owner as any attaching entity that is party to a joint poll agreement with Hawaiian Electric and has an ownership share in a poll jointly owned with Hawaiian Electric. Okay, a renter is any attaching entity that is not an owner, does not have an ownership share in a poll, and is party to an attachment agreement with Hawaiian Electric. And finally, the term attacher is used interchangeably to include an owner or a renter. Essentially, anyone attaching an approved attacher that can attach their equipment to our pole. Okay. Next one. So why are there double poles? Okay, if you drive around town, you'll notice that there are two poles standing side by side, in a lot of instances. Typically, there is going to be a shorter pole next to the taller pole. So as you can see in this picture, a double pole is a situation where a new pole is installed to replace an existing pole, but attachments on the old poles, such as communication facilities, street lights, traffic control cables, electrical facilities, have not been completely transferred yet or removed from the old pole. Okay, ideally, when we do a pole replacement, we want all the existing facilities on the old pole to be transferred to the new pole. So because of this, that is not done timely, you see two poles side by side. But like I said, typically, we are the erecting company for majority of the maintenance pole replacements. So when we go in and put in the taller pole, we'll typically top it at the next level because we're putting in the new pole, we transfer our facilities over so we can clear that space. We top it either to the street light level or to the comm level. Next slide. So who is responsible for transferring or removing attachments? So generally, the owners of the attachments are responsible for transferring or removing their facilities from double poles at their cost. Now, we may have some special agreements between certain attachers, but generally, the owners of the attachments are responsible for transferring or removing their facility. Next slide. So what is the process for transferring the attachments? The owners of attachments are given notice that a pole is being replaced and are requested to move their attachments at their cost. Owners of the attachments are expected to transfer their attachments within 30 business days, typically within 30 business days for joint pole owners, according to our joint pole agreements, and within 30 calendar days for renters and, based on their attachment agreements, and both of them are to notify the company when their transfers have been completed. Now, you notice the difference between business days and calendar days. That's because the joint pole agreements were negotiated before, they were typically negotiated before the attachment agreement. So it's basically the time of the agreements. Okay. So another thing that we have to deal with the double poles is the standard transfer versus non-standard transfers under the pole license agreement. So we did have an agreement with Hawaiian Telecom as part of another docket where we did purchase Hawaiian Tel's ownership share in the joint poles that we jointly own with them. As part of that agreement, we did agree to clean up the double poles, and we came up with a standard transfer versus a non-standard transfer. Okay. So as you can see on the screen, that's the definition of a standard transfer. You can think of a standard transfer as probably most of the transfers, the double poles out there, because it's more of the easier type of transfers to do, where one of the key things we identified is that it doesn't require a service interruption of Hawaiian Tel service. So as part of the agreement, Hawaiian Electric can perform these standard transfers. We hire a Hawaiian Telecom qualified contractor to do the transfers. Okay. So that is to take care of the Hawaiian Tel cables, but we will also coordinate with the other entities attached to the pole to transfer their attachments. For example, street lights, traffic control cables, and other communication equipment from other carriers. For example, the Spectrum, the AT&T, Verizon, etc. So that's the standard transfer. Okay. Non-standard transfers, like I said, it's a smaller percentage, but it's the more technical type of transfers and potentially requires an interruption in Hawaiian Tel service. So it could require cable splicing, moving of specific Hawaiian Tel equipment that may require an outage or just require the Hawaiian Tel expertise. So in those instances, Hawaiian Tel is required to perform the non-standard transfers. Okay. So when Hawaiian Tel completes these non-standard transfers, if Hawaiian Telecom is last off the pole for backlog double poles, Hawaiian Telecom will remove the old pole if they are the last stop. Okay. But if Hawaiian Tel is not the last stop for a non-standard transfer, for example, if there's still if there's still Spectrum or city streetlights on the pole and Hawaiian Tel already completed their non-standard transfer, then it'll come back to Hawaiian Electric Company to remove that old pole once it's there. Okay. So what are some of the lessons learned that over the past 5 years that, we've undertaken this feat? I call it a feat. Attachment owners often do not complete the transfers in a timely, consistent manner, especially on Oahu. Reason for the delays range from maybe insufficient staffing or prioritizing other work over completing attachment transfers. Okay. In 2023, this year, unfortunately, we only had one contractor for Hawaii Island, one qualified Hawaiian Telecom contractor, and 2 qualified Hawaiian Telecom contractors for Maui addressing standard Hawaiian Telecom transfers and double pole removals. There is no ready solution for the lack of contractors. We are trying to find opportunities to get additional COM qualified contractors, Hawaiian Telecom qualified contractors that can move Hawaiian Tel's cable on our behalf. Okay. As mentioned, one of the 2 Maui contractors was called upon to support the Maui wildfire restoration work, which has taken priority over double pole remediation work. So we were left with only one on Maui. Hawaiian Electric has also transitioned to a 2-year contract with the contractors to prevent the end of year lag between contract renewal and contractors working that has previously occurred within single year contracts. So within the past 5 years, we always renegotiated a contract, put a bid out annually, get unit cost bids from these contractors. But this year, when they released the RFP, the team negotiated a 2-year contract. So hopefully eliminating the lag between, year over year. So this would allow us to increase the amount of time that the contractors are performing double pole removal in a given 2-year span. Okay. So how many backlog standard double poles are there? So as of December 1st, there still is an estimated 6,520 backlog standard transfer double pole remaining to be removed on all islands. So over the next 5 years. So please note that this is an estimate, as Hawaiian Electric continues to find backlog standard double poles either already removed or we have no record of the pole actually being replaced. So we do, and the list that we have is dynamic because we're constantly looking at it. Some of the ones that may have been classified as standard, as we take a closer look, it's really a non-standard, and vice versa. Some of the ones that were classified as non-standard, we find out that it's actually should be standard. So, but for the most part, we're looking at about 6,500, and these are for all 5 islands. So how do we plan to complete our commitment to double pole removals? Well, just doing the math, we're going to target approximately 1,300 backlog standard double pole removals per year over the next 5 years. As part of the agreement that we had with Hawaiian Telecom, that we did submit a PC application when we did purchase their share, was to remove all backlog poles within a 10-year period. So as mentioned, we're into year 5. We have 5 more years. We're also going to evaluate opportunities to lower the contractor unit costs and gain accountability with the contractors to place priority on the work assigned to them. We're going to also work with the occupants and lessees or the renters in improving their response time and completing their transfers of their facilities, as well as proper notification back to Hawaiian Electric upon completion. So that is another key thing, is that once the attachers complete their attachments, that we get properly notified so we can check that off our list, as far as, and then, hopefully just end up with a bare pole that we can send a contractor to remove. We also work with Hawaiian Telecom to timely complete its non-standard transfers and double pole removals, and work with Hawaiian Telecom to ensure timely provisions of the required standard transfer materials to Hawaiian Electric's contractors in adequate quantity. So, we did have some situations where our contractors were running low or ran out of certain material. So we were able to work with Hawaiian Tel to make sure that they continued to keep up their supply of standard transfer materials. Because part of the agreement in the standard transfer that we do is that Hawaiian Telecom furnishes the material required to do the standard transfer. So, as mentioned, we were able to continuously work with them, and we want to make sure that we can do that for the next 5 years. Okay. Okay, so next we're going to provide a high-level summary of the 17 questions that were sent to us by the commission about our double pole status. Okay. So the first question dealt with or asked, is there only one department responsible for double pole removal? And our response, high-level response was, yes, Operations, Planning, and Construction Management Division within Hawaiian Electric Company is responsible for double poles. The second question dealt with identifying all company databases used to track double poles. So, as mentioned, we have 3 islands under our joint pole group, and each of the 3 islands, because joint pole was created at different times, different processes, we have 3 different databases. So HECO has what's called JPM. It's a Windows 2.19 server-based database. It was recently updated. We had something else before, but was recently updated to JPM. So that's what we use for tracking our joint pole information. HELCO has what's called JPT or JP Track, and it's an access database. MECO is currently using what's called an NOI database, which is basically built off of Excel. Okay. However, we are looking to create something similar for Maui Electric, similar to HELCO, which is called JPT, which is an access database. So we are looking to do that. We haven't started, we just started discussions with Maui on that. But for Oahu, we're going to continue to use JPM. Okay. And just to clarify that these databases don't specifically track double poles. I mean, it's not like we can just run a report and say these are the double poles. There's a lot of research that we have to do because double poles are really as a result of incomplete changeovers and poles that have not been removed. So we have to look in our respective JP databases to get those bits of information in order to come up with our count and our report. Question 3 asked the company to provide data and status data related to the count of the number of double poles, how many incomplete changeovers, and what is the status. So that was question 3. So we do have a table response for that. Similarly, question 4 requested the number of standard transfers and non-standard transfers and the general status of each removal. So we have completed a table for that as well. And just to point that non-standard transfers, again, are performed by Hawaiian Telecom, and then Hawaiian Electric is responsible for the standard transfers. Okay, question 5 had to do with describing the steps in double pole removal for standard transfers and a listing of all the attachers on our pole. So we did provide that. Question 6 had to do with listing any of the penalties or other actions that can be taken based on current pole attachment and other pole agreements. So we did look at our agreements, and unfortunately our agreements don't really have any kind of actions or penalties that can be enforced. We do have dispute resolution terms, but we have not taken it to that level. Like I said, it also contains very few sanctions and enforcement provisions. Question 7 had to do with identifying all notification and enforcement options available to HECO. So we did mention that the FCC allows very limited sanctions or penalties, and HECO operates in a jurisdiction with the FCC. So, yeah, there are very few sanctions or penalties to be imposed on attackers in very limited circumstances that are unrelated to parties' obligations to transfer the equipment to the new poles. Question 8, does HECO enforce penalties to ensure response and action? As previously mentioned, unfortunately, there are no current penalties or actions to ensure response other than to continue to negotiate with the joint pole owners and the attachers in getting them to transfer their facilities over from the old pole to the new pole. Question 9 had to do with, is there a contract or agreement that is considered a breach of contract if a party is unresponsive to HECO, the pole transfer requests? And HECO has not cited non-responsiveness as a breach of contract, but it may constitute a breach of contract. Question 10, is the removal of the remaining poles in the budget for the next 5 years? What is in the budget? So currently we are receiving, as part of this HT transfer deal, we are receiving $650,000 per year over 10 years. So it's a 6.5 million. However, as we've completed transfers and pole removals in the first 5 years, we did learn that 650,000, is not enough based on the contracts and contractors that we have. So we estimate that we're going to need approximately 2.75 to 3.15 million per year over the remaining 5 years. So currently, we are in budget reviews to get this additional funding. We are getting some additional funding for 2024, and we're going to continue to work in getting this additional funding internally to fund this next 5 years. So what are the challenges? Question 11 had to do with what are the challenges in removing double poles that have no remaining attachments? So because if it's a bare pole, our Hawaiian Electric crews can do the pole removal, as well as we do have contractors that can do the pole removal. So one of the challenges is ensuring availability of contractors or T&D crews that can perform the work. So when I say availability, our T&D crews, while they are, they can do this work, they are also faced with other priority jobs that, come into play, whether it be customer jobs or system jobs. So we have to fit those projects. The resource planners have to fit the bare pole removals in with those other jobs, as well as, again, part of the challenge with getting the contractors is making sure that the contractors can place priority when we assign them the work. Okay. Question 12 had to do with, are there plans to upgrade the databases? As mentioned, no current plans to upgrade, but I did mention about MECO because this just came up about last week. We are looking to upgrade MECOs, or basically try to adopt what we're doing at Hawaii Electric Light with JP Track, try to use a similar access type database for Maui Electric. Question 13, is HECO committed to removing all double poles in the next 5 years? Yes, we are committed to removing what's called backlog double poles, okay, which was described in the PUC application when we did the Hawaiian Tel ownership transfer. So backlog of double poles. However, at this time, we will not be able to remediate all preventive, which we call the new double poles that have been created since October 16, 2018, or basically the DNO. Yeah, so any of those new double poles, we are removing it proactively, but to complete the backlog as well as all double poles so that there are no double poles at year 10, yeah, we're not going to be able to do that, but we are committing to do the backlog, removing all the backlog double poles. Okay, question 14. Confirm the number of double poles HECO committed to removing in the initial 10-year period. So HECO committed to removing approximately 9,420 backlog standard double poles. Again, these are standard transfer double poles. Question 15 had to do with what is HECO's preference for providing status of double pole removal to the public. So we are proposing right now quarterly progress metrics on the company's website. So as far as the number of double poles that we started with and the number of double poles that have been removed to date. So at this time, we'll entertain any questions from the stakeholders, commission, and consumer advocate regarding the report or responses to the commission questions.
This is Commissioner Yost. I'd like to just back up a little bit to get information about how HECO initially determines a pole needs to be replaced. Can you describe the standards that apply that leads HECO to that determination that any given pole needs to be replaced?
Yes, I can speak to that, briefly speak to that. So typically poles are replaced as part of a maintenance plan. So basically through inspection, pole inspections. As the pole gets inspected, if the inspector determines that the pole needs to be replaced, he'll submit that, put it on a list, and then our resource planners will then go ahead and schedule it for pole replacement. I don't have the inspection criteria with me because that's done by another group, but it's typically done through inspections. There are other cases where it might be through a customer complaint. The customer may complain, say, hey, I notice a pole is leaning, or maybe even through engineering. When they do their engineering on certain poles, they'll find out that a pole may be overloaded or whatnot. So they'll submit that and say this pole has to be replaced. There are a variety of reasons why poles can get replaced, but majority of it is probably through inspections.
Does HECO, let's say the reason is that the pole is structurally unstable. That's one potential reason why a pole would be replaced, right? It's leaning, or it's termite eaten, or some other problem that makes it structurally unstable. If the reason is that, does HECO within its tracking of the double poles that still are standing, does it have any records or priority determination of which poles are, perhaps should be removed faster than others because they are structurally unstable? And can you describe where that exists in the tracking and so forth?
Yes, so based on the double pole list that we do have, if there is something that is identified, as you mentioned, because, oh, this one really should be at the top of the list. My group has, we kind of put a, rather than a number priority from 1 to 6,000, we put a high, medium, low type of priority on there. So if there is a pole that is on the list that still has to be transferred, or it still remains as a double pole, but it's determined that, hey, this one really needs to be at the top of the list, we'll actually pull that pole, particular work packet out, if you will, and put that at the top of the list. And we'll work with the attachers to say, hey, this is a pole that we need to get done now. And then we'll go ahead and, coordinate the transfers for that pole. So even if it's a one-off, that's what you're asking.
Do you identify poles that would stay on a annual basis and by ordinance?
Or the-
Yes, so is there I understand that that's the contract. Is your contract with these? Is your contract with these outside contractors based on a per pole removal, or is it based on a certain number of poles that they have to remove within a year?
It's based on a work authorization amount that they have, that my group is told that we can award to these contractors. So there's another portion of our group that manages the actual contract. My group does not manage the contract, but we're told we can use these contractors. And my understanding is that these contractors are allowed X dollars to do certain amounts of work for a given year. My group in turn will find the work packets that we can assign to these contractors. So we'll assign, say, 30 to 50 work packets at a time to a given contract.
And how much, when you say work packet,
One pole.
okay,
Yeah.
so 50 poles a year?
Oh, no, at a given time. So
What's a given time?
Like
I'm an attorney, so.
60 days. So in other words, this work authorization would be typically good for 1 year.
Right.
2 years. So the first release of work packets that we give would be like 30 to 50.
Uh-huh.
Now, if they finish that 30 to 50, then we'll give them the next set. Yeah, so if a contractor can work expeditiously and finish the 30 to 50 in a given time, then we'll keep awarding them work up to their work authorization amount. We'll check back with our group that's managing the work authorization, say, can we give this contractor more work? Do they still have money in their work authorization to do more poles?
Okay. And at what point in time are the attachers or renters notified that they have to remove their attachments to Hiko's poles?
So typically they were notified prior as part of the joint pole process.
Okay.
When the notice of replacement went out. So these are double poles that were sitting there because transfers have not occurred. So when my guys create the work package, they'll look to see, oh, who's still on the pole? Is it City? Is it Spectrum or whatnot? And if they identify that City and Spectrum is still on the pole, even though they have been notified prior, they will go back and say, hey, we need you guys to get this transfer completed so that, because the contractor is going to go out and the contractor that we hire is only authorized to transfer Hawaiian Tails cables.
So, and that's what, how much time from the second notice are they given to remove their attachments? Let's say if they're 30 days, 40 days?
Yeah, I mean, I would say probably less than 30 days from the second notice.
From the second notice. So what is your goal per year for pole removals? What is your goal?
For the double pole? The
Yeah,
backhoe double
yeah.
pole? We're looking at right now, based on how much we have left, about 1,300. 1,300 double poles we have to do in the next 5 years.
Okay. And how many, you only have 2 contractors?
No,
for-
we have,
How many contractors?
on Oahu, this year, we're looking at maybe about 5, I want to say 5. For Hawaii, I think we have 2. And then Maui, I think we only have 1.
So is it, I guess is it easier, say, to award contracts to these contractors saying, these are the poles that we want you to remove in the next year? Not on a 3250, but, and your contract is based on that amount, and notify the attacher, say, your poles are slated within the year, you need to remove it by March.
I would say it probably would be easier to do it that way. Yeah.
And isn't it easier? And since obviously based on what I've just heard, your contracts with the attachers have no penalty provision, but you have a penalty provision for the contractors, correct?
The way my understanding is with the contracts now, we don't have a penalty provision in the sense that
Well, if they don't perform a certain amount of, as they're required to do, then they don't necessarily,
so
that's a breach of contract, isn't it?
what I'm told is the work authorizations that are given to the contractor
Uh-huh.
is not a promise for work. So if we give a contractor, say, a work authorization of, say, $200,000, okay, like you have, here's this contract, because it's,
But that's within HECO's control, correct? You folks can revise your contracts with these contractors and say, for $200,000, we want you to remove this amount of posts.
yes,
And if you fail to do so, you're in breach of contract.
Right.
Okay.
correct.
So
Correct.
that's within your control. Right now, you can't negotiate stuff that has already been put in contract with the attachers, but you can, right?
So what I'm hearing is, yes, if we can change the way we do our contracts, yes, where we, how,
Well, and as well as your internal process, correct? It's
That's
to give the attachers more time to remove it by a certain date.
yes,
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Nakagawa,
yes.
just want to clarify. So we got roughly about 6,200 polls. What's the breakdown, say by jurisdiction? I mean,
But I,
is it Oahu got the most? Kaupo got the
Uh,
most?
yes, I can say that.
Just roughly, I just want to get a sense. Right, because to me, it goes along with how many contractors you got, right? If you got, 5,000 on Maui to do and we only got one contractor, we got a problem, right?
Yes, correct. So Oahu, we have roughly around 4,300. Yes, 4,300 remaining. Hawaii, roughly around 1,100, and then Maui about 1,000.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. So Oahu does have the bulk of it. Yes.
okay. And I just want to, and this was in regard to question 10. So you're looking at about, let's say 3 million, right? Actually needed per year over the 5 years. And that's to meet the 1,300 goal per year. So in other words, 3 million, we're gonna get rid of 1,300
Correct. Yes.
and or
That's
more,
great.
maybe.
And more, yes. If we can
Okay.
get more efficiencies with the
Yeah.
contract and the pricing and just internally, we can do more.
Okay,
more goals.
and then, so the T&D crew, that's all under ops planning, construction management.
So T&D
They're separate, huh?
Yeah, our construction crews is
Yeah.
part of T&D operations, formerly known as construction and maintenance, but
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Um. Overall, maybe, I just want to get a sense, how, you know, notwithstanding the numbers we've done already for 5 years, right, which is about 2,900 removed. I mean, has it, I don't know, I guess I'm trying to get a sense of how has it progressed with everyone, right? Because there's a lot of guys attached to the polls, including the city, right? And maybe even the state, right? And how, I just want to guess kind of how's that relationship going? Because, right, we're moving at this pace, right, over the first 5 years and only 3,000 was removed, say, right? And now right, heading into the last 5 years and really, you know, how can we accelerate it? But I want to take a step back. How's all the relationships with Kai? Like, is there times that, right? I mean, notwithstanding, you gotta have more employees or we're short employees or things like that. But I mean, any problems between like you guys and the others?
No, I don't think it's any problems per se. I think we just need to, I think we definitely need to work closer with them in terms of expressing the priority and getting the commitment from them. Because we've been sending email. We do have, discussions, but we do send emails, say, hey, we need you folks to transfer. Some of the attachers are very good. Some of them, they take a little longer, and they've cited because of resources on their side that we can't control. And priorities for them compared to double polls in general. But just, I think because of this hearing and with all the legislation that has been introduced, I'm hoping that it has emphasized the importance and the priority of getting this double poll situation cleaned up.
Yeah, because I think, right, we just need to have everyone's commitment. Right. If you guys read the reso, right, the ledge was urging us to open a new proceeding to take care of this. And, that means a whole new docket, right? And dragging everyone in to come to some agreement on how we're going to tackle getting rid of all the polls once and for all, right? And so we're trying to avoid that because, that's going to take a while, right? A docket might take a year to do that. By then, right, the backlog, now we're short a year, right? Now we got to do it in 4 years. So I think that's really what I'm looking for, right? Can I go to the ledge by the end of this month in the report and say, we have the commitment of everyone, right, to do what they can in the individual areas, right, to take care of the double post situation, right? And thus, no need one docket, don't need a new proceeding, right? Because that's the key for me, right? I don't want to, right? We've had proceedings already. We've had and it's just not a commitment of everyone to kind of, we have 5 years to do it or whatever. I'm not sure if the ledge is going to be pleased with 5 years. That's the goal right now. And I think there's a commitment by everyone, but I think that's where I'm trying to get to, right? Like if we can get commitment of everyone, right, that we're going to support 1,300, right? The number, you guys are doing it from your side, making sure you can get the money, right? Maybe look at your contracts and things like that to make it better, right? Or more advantage, take advantage of and take advantage of the commitment of everyone so that we can get this done. So just commentary, if you will.
Thanks, Mr. Nakawa. Just a few more questions. Going back to the discussion earlier about prioritizing polls that are clearly structurally unstable. Do we have an estimate of how many of those polls are currently standing still?
That are structurally unstable?
Yeah, that seem to pose a imminent risk to public safety and so forth. Is there a number of how many of those have not yet been removed?
I don't have that number with me, but we can get that and I'll check back with my staff.
Okay. And then the attachers, the folks who have to come out and reattach their equipment, are they sometimes using the same contractors that you folks are using to?
Good question. Yes, they are. So for example, I know some of our contractors that are Hawaiian Tel qualified, that Hawaiian Tel gave us a list of qualified contractors that we can hire that are authorized to be Hawaiian Tel's capable. So some of those contractors do also work for Spectrum, do contracting work for Spectrum. So we have told those contractors that, hey, if your line is on your facilities is also on the pole and Spectrum is okay with you folks, and you can enter into a separate contract, nothing to do with Hawaiian Electric, but it's upon you to negotiate a contract, with Spectrum specifically for that. By all means, go ahead and do that. So I do know that there are some of our contractors that we are using that are also moving lines on behalf of, for example, like Spectrum. But we don't get involved in that because Hawaiian Electric is not authorized to touch Spectrum's line. So it has to be independent, right? It's just that the contractor is working on our behalf to move Hawaiian Tel's cable. And they're also maybe qualified by Spectrum and have a separate contract with Spectrum to move their facilities.
Okay. So that means that sometimes that could increase the amount of just the slowdown for you folks if they're working for multiple parties. They're not just dedicated to doing your work, like they're also working for others. It's kind of like a limited pool of resources for everyone to tap into. But then also it sounds like there could be maybe some more coordination going on between the scheduling of those contractors' work. Maybe they could be doing multiple things at once if they're on the same site.
Yeah, it's like you said, I see it as a pro and con. Pro meaning that maybe instead of having Spectrum go out to move their facilities and then we have our contractor go move Hawaiian Tel's cable, maybe that contractor touches Hawaiian Tel and Spectrum cable at the same time. But a lot of these contractors may be also doing separate work for Spectrum on other projects, like, Spectrum may have a project, I'm just using Spectrum as an example, but, they may have a separate project with Spectrum that doesn't involve Hawaiian Electric in general, right? So again, taking up their resources to the Spectrum. Right?
Do you ever run into situations where you don't know who attached to a given pole?
Yes.
And how frequent is that?
It happens. I don't have a number, but we've had situations where we don't know whose cable it is. We sent out, say, is this Hawaiian Tel? Is this yours? They say, no. Is this Spectrum? No. And so there's some situations, some cables out there, we're still not sure whose facilities there are. We just don't know. Do we just go ahead and cut it and, abandon it? Or we're trying to find out whose facilities there are.
How do we resolve that problem?
Good question. Yeah, we're trying to go down whatever avenue or contact that we can find, to see, like, obviously these facilities were put on the pole by somebody without authorization from Hawaiian Electric, right? So it may come down to us just saying, hey, we're gonna just go out there. Nobody's gonna claim it as far as an authorized attacher that we know we have a contract with. If nobody's claiming it within X days, we're just gonna go have somebody to go cut it. But then we gotta hire somebody, right? And we gotta figure out, okay, does that come out of our pocket now to pay for that?
Is that something where HECO could make a proposal to the commission as to how, like, some standard way to deal with that so that it's clear to everyone involved, like what happens on what timeline? Like, is that something you could propose?
I can definitely take that back to our staff and sure we can come up with something.
I'm hearing that, we're talking about the backlog, right, which is 2018 prior. Since 2018, it's my understanding that an additional 5,000 plus double poles have come into existence. Does that sound right in terms of the number?
Yes. I think we provided in our response to question 3, approximately 5,600.
Since 2018. So in addition to the ones we're talking about. So how many per year are we now are still coming into existence? Like, how we were talking about removing 1,300 a year, but how many new ones are likely to come into existence in 2023, for example?
So based on from year 2018 through 2023, well, 2018, since we used October 16, 2018 as the demarcation point, from that point, there was only about 153 preventive poles, we call it. But from 2019 to 2023, we were averaging about 1,000, maybe 1,100 double poles that were created. Double poles that were created, but we have also since removed some of these preventive poles because, like I said, it may have come up as a customer. Customer says, hey, I got this double pole, in front of my house, or very concerned about this pole. So we'll look at it. My guys determine if it's if it's a preventive or a backlog double pole. And even if it's a preventive, we'll still do it. It just comes out of a different bucket, if you will. So we have removed preventive double poles, but to answer your question, we're averaging about 1,100.
So it doesn't seem like we're making a lot of progress, I guess, is my concern, right? If we're committed to reducing this backlog, but we're still creating 1,100 a year approximately. Like, do you think it makes sense to come up with a new process for better prevention of the creation of new poles, new double poles?
I think by us improving understanding of double poles as well as the commitment, we can hopefully remove or shorten the slope, I guess, lower the slope if you will. Initially, before we were even addressing double pole, this was like an exponential slope, right? But I see, even though we're adding double poles, the fact that we're attacking the backlog of double poles, we're slowly declining the slope. We're not at the point where we can say that we're making a huge difference, but we are. I think of it as we're on the downs. We're slowly declining the slope because we're addressing double poles in general. But we're not doing it at a fast enough rate that everyone expects us to.
This question is for Charter and Hawaiian Telecom. What is your internal processes for when you get a notice from HECO that there is a double pole? How long does it take you to, I guess, send someone out, or what is your internal process? So start with Hawaiian Telecom first.
So, Mr. Nakagawa's team will inform us via email. If it's an emergency, it'll come over as urgent, and that's a safety concern that Commissioner Yost brought up. We'll take care of that within 24 hours of receipt. The rest of the double poles comes in batches via email, and then it goes into our work order queue from there to work on.
And how long is your work order queue? How backlogged is your work order?
How backlogged is it? So when we came up with the original plan for the backlog, we estimated it would be about 500 poles. That's based on, 95% would be standard transfers done by Hawaiian Electric, 5% would fall to us, and that's how we got the 500. Obviously, that number hasn't been accurate, so it goes into job into the pool of all our work orders. We can handle the 500 because that's already built into our budget and built into our resources. The rest of it, gets placed in the queue and gets done within the year if we can get it done within the year.
Okay, so if you know that 500 is not cutting it, have you thought about or considered increasing your budget for?
Yeah, absolutely. We are in the process of building a plan to contract out the non-standard transfers because we can't handle it internally. And our contractors can't handle it either, but we're telling them to ramp up and we're starting to give them numbers, and then we'll be.
So what are
building
your
the plan.
numbers in order to catch up?
We'll have to do, we're planning about 80 a month.
Close to 1,000.
Close to 1,000. That'll take care of both the backlog and the ongoing 1,000 or 1,100 a year that Hawaiian Electric is adding. So we're estimating 80 a month to do that.
Okay, so if Hawaiian Electric notifies you, let's say, in the next 6 months to a year, we plan to remove these poles. Is it possible for you to basically coordinate with, since you guys can use the same contractors, to have them do it at the same time?
We can coordinate to have them do it at the same time. But because we're doing the non-standard transfers, which are a lot more complex, it'll slow them down to do it that way. If it's standard transfers, then not a problem, and they're already doing that. But non-standard transfers, a good example is when you have a transition from aerial to underground, there's a lateral on the pole that goes to the underground system. When the new pole is placed, you have to redirect the ducts to that new pole. So it's a whole nother set of plans and designs that has to go through the city permitting process to move those ducts over to the new pole. That'll just slow down the charters and the Hawaiian Electrics to do that.
Okay, so how long of a process do you need or time frame do you need in order to address the non-standard?
We'll need the 5 years remaining to take care of the backlog.
And your budget, but your budget's only covers 1,000 poles a year?
It's even less than that, right? Our budget was only for 500
Right.
for the entire 10-year period. So it's gonna
So it's going to take more than 5 years is what you're
it's gonna
telling me.
quadruple our budget basically, yeah, to do it
Okay.
all.
So right now the commission is faced with two options. We do it the nice way or we figure out a penalty way.
Mhm.
So obviously we don't want to penalize. So what is the incentive do you folks need in order to increase your budget? And I'm not saying quadruple, but
Yeah.
at least double or
The we are going to increase our budget because we intend on meeting the commitment made originally to the commission to
on the
clear
backlog.
to clear the backlog.
But that doesn't address 2018 going forward.
It doesn't address 2018 going forward. So,
And you're saying that requires quadruple what you have right now.
right, based on the 1,100 per year that Paul shared.
Okay. Same question for charter.
As far as the emergency polls, similar to Hawaiian Tel, we try to take care within a 24-hour period. On the standard transfers, we average about 30 days. I think the non-standard transfers are the ones that, like Dan had mentioned, if there's risers or even the more majority of the ones that are more complicated are when we have the cross arms out there. So I think the cross arm, that's what's creating some of the backlog right now. But we have been handling the emergencies, even on the cross arm situation, within the 30-day periods.
And then I guess the same question that I posed to Hawaiian Telecom, what would make it easier for you folks to address the backlog? How long of notice or what kind of coordination points would like for Hawaiian Electric to provide?
I believe that the process that they've given us and is working, at least for us. We do see sometimes it takes a little bit longer than 30 days depending on the resources available, but we have been, for the most part, keeping up with the requests that have been coming through.
Well, what's the high end then? Is
Sorry?
it 60 days, max,
Well,
90 days?
for the non-standard transfers, those are a little bit longer depending on what kinds of coordinations we have to do. But the standard transfers, I believe we do it, I think at max maybe 60 days, but on average, it's about 30 days right now.
How long does the non-standard transfers take?
It depends on, sometimes we have to coordinate with other carriers. I think there's situations where depending on how it is, we're kind of locked in, so we can't necessarily transfer right away. We have to wait for somebody else to move before we can move our facilities. But as far as the cross arms go, those depends on when we can coordinate or if we coordinate cross arm placements before we can do the transfers.
On our side, we target 90 days. But as it gets more complex, obviously you need more time for those. And then if there's a permitting required, that could take 6 months to a year to get a permit.
So I'm sorry to pick on the three of you guys, but you guys seem to have the most coordination required. And is there a way for you folks to come up with a plan? Let's say, because permitting is required, let's say that these non-standard stuff are going to be taken care of. These poles are going to be taken care of, let's say next year and start putting in the permit, because you know how long permitting takes.
Yeah, and they have a backlog.
Yeah, and they have a backlog too.
Yeah, so we do have things in place. And sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't, where, if we know it's going to be a lateral pole, we try to have Hawaiian Electric replace the pole in the same hole. It takes a lot of coordinating because you need all the companies out there working together to place it in the same hole. But if we can do that, then we avoid that delay situation and then we can do it all at once.
How often does that occur?
It occurs occasionally, but not as often as we'd like. But it is written into our agreements that we would, we are to cooperate and try to achieve that. So it's something that we'll probably look at closer. And that way it will at least eliminate the long backlog items from the list going forward.
Debbie, why don't you go ahead and ask your question? You've been waiting patiently. Debbie is our chief engineer.
First of all, can you guys hear me? Because we're having problems with our speakers. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, I just wanted to get clarification on the information that Hawaiian Electric provided to us. Yes, at the start of year one, or currently you have 6,920 left. But, to clarify, those are only the standard ones. And when you add on the non-standard double pole, those that require non-standard transfers, I believe that's another 3,000 or so, right? So the actual number is higher. But I guess at the beginning of this agreement or commitment, you were only providing a commitment to remove double poles that required standard transfers only.
Correct. The numbers I provided and I mentioned were the standard transfers that we're responsible for.
And why did the count not include the non-standard transfers? Because although Hawaiian Tel is required to do that, who is responsible in the end for having those removed off the poles?
My understanding is that the double pole commitment is both Hawaiian Electric and Hawaiian Telecom.
Okay, so the
For the
actual
backlog,
total is
to address the
10,000.
backlog. Yeah, so in question 3, I believe question 3, the detailed Q&A, row 6, the total number of double poles presently as of when we did the Q&As of November 2nd. We had a total of 10,782, which includes the non-standard, what we had classified as non-standard.
Okay, that's helpful because I think that's the number really that, we should be, everyone should be focusing on at least removing it. That's not counting the new ones that come what you folks call preventative, right? So the total number of double poles is actually 10,782, which is the sum of both the non-standards and the standards. That was one question I had. Yes,
It's just
and
the
the other
backlog.
clarification, right? The other clarification I had on, I understand that you said you need contractors to do the work for the standard, but according to your other table provided in your question 04, for example, if HECO has 4,200 at this time, and the contractors, there's only 128 of those in progress by the contractor. That means that about 4,100 currently don't have any contracts with any contractor to do those poles, right? So only 128 are basically out in the contractors to-do list, right?
Correct. At that given time that we created the response, that is correct. Because as I mentioned,
Okay.
we do have work packets created, meaning we're ready to give it to a contractor, but we're not gonna, the way our contracts, we were instructed to do our contracts is we are only gonna give them X amount at a given time, right? Because some of these contractors are good performing contractors, some are slower than the others, so we don't want to give every contractor the same amount of work packets and they hold up, the work. It's the ones that can do the work quickly, we're gonna give them more. They finish the first batch, we give them the next batch. That's how.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, just, thank you for confirming, I guess it's the enormity of the situation that, there's 4,000 left, but only 128 currently are literally in the field waiting to be done. Hold on. I might have another question, but actually that's all for now. Thank you, Leo, for letting me ask my questions. I'm gonna stop for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Now let's turn over to CA.
Thank you to the commission and Hawaiian Electric companies for convening this status update and the attendance of the other stakeholders and participants as we collectively work to gather information to resolve our longstanding community concern. As stated in the House concurrent resolution, Senate Draft 1, double poles can pose threat to public safety, and removal of them will eliminate potential public hazards. Organized communication and utility pole lines unfavorably influence the surrounding community. So a few questions for Hawaiian Electric and various stakeholders. So the companies, and this is in reference to report page 1-2. Hawaiian Electric notes a longstanding agreement with the County of Hawaii to transfer Hawaii County street light fixtures from old pole to new pole. And then the company is billing Hawaii County an agreed upon dollar amount for each transfer completed. I guess the general question is, are there similar agreements with other counties within the state? And if not, would the company consider pursuing similar agreements with other counties or the state itself?
To answer your question, no, we don't have any such agreement with the county or even with the state of Hawaii for Oahu. For Maui Electric owns and operates the streetlights, so streetlights, there is not a concern. But unfortunately for Oahu, we did try to, we did approach the city a few years back about when we started undertaking the double poles, if they would be interested in us doing a transfer on their behalf, similar to like the Big Island. But they came back and said, no, it was a union type issue for them. So the answer was no. The state, we entertained that. We did discuss it with them, and they were interested. But we had made a decision back then that if we couldn't get the city and the state together, that we wouldn't pursue it. But, in light of this double pole situation now, maybe we may have to think about it and say, like, if the state is willing, maybe we may want to consider that if they're still willing, because at least we can get the state part out of it.
And is that something you could possibly revisit with the city and county of Honolulu?
We tried that. In fact, I did have a discussion with the city maybe about a week ago, just to say, hey, remember, because they have new people involved now. Some of the other folks that we were dealing with has retired. So I did bring up that issue just verbally. And they did mention again that they didn't feel, they said it's going to be a union issue. But like I said, that was just over a phone conversation.
Yeah. Aside from the agreement with Hawaiian Tel, I think it did reference it. And but just to clarify, are there similar agreements with the other attachers, the pole attachers, similar to the agreement that you have with Hawaiian Tel?
Our agreement with Hawaiian Tel is a little different, but we do have pole attachment agreements with Spectrum and Verizon and the AT&T. Yeah.
We have a backlog of double poles, and you're proposing a target removal of approximately 1,300 double poles per year annually for the rest of the 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then is that broken down? Do you have a breakdown by island?
The number of double poles that we have?
That you're targeting for removal on each island.
I don't have that information really available, but we can get that. We do have the breakdown. Yeah, thanks. I just don't have it.
So just another, I guess, a clarifying question. So when you mentioned the areas, you're not prioritizing based on an area location, but the prioritizing is based on a risk assessment. I think the risk is high, medium, low, with likelihood that they're at risk to fall. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, that's the onesie, twosie types. Yeah,
Okay.
so if we do have it, but we'll also try to do is if we do find those type of poles that are the high priority for whatever reason, we try to group them with some other poles within the area that we know that there's double poles, especially if a contractor is going to be on a given street.
Right, to make work.
Yeah, right, to take advantage of the windshield time, that they're out there. Yeah.
Okay. On an annual basis, how many complaints from the public are Hawaiian Electric receiving concerning double pole?
I don't have that number with me, but
Would you characterize it as
I
fair
would
amount?
say it's been increasing over the years. Primarily on Oahu. We had a few on Maui, a few on the Big Island, but on Oahu, weekly we'll get complaints. It comes in through different avenues. It comes in through email, through our customer service, comes through a phone call to our joint pole coordinator, comes in even through government relations. They'll get something from from the legislators or their constituents and whatnot. Yeah.
And those community concerns, are they factored into the prioritization?
Yes.
Could you elaborate on how those?
So initially, when we did the double poles, we did reach out to our community relations groups. When we started, our first year, we targeted 4 areas because we had numerous complaints. And I believe the 4 areas, going by memory, one was North Shore, the other was in Kalihi, other one was in Diamond Head, Kahala, and the other 4th area was Kailua. So this was the first year that we did double pole, this type of magnitude or this type of project. So we had a target of like 400 poles, roughly 100 poles in each of these areas.
Okay.
That's what we did. And since then, as the complaints come in, like I mentioned, it's coming in from all different areas. And we try to address it as they come in and group it with poles in those given areas.
So kind of piggybacking off of Commissioner Yo's question, and I think it was touched on by the commissioners as well, ultimately the goal is to get that total number of double poles down, right?
Mhm.
There's the backlog and there's the issue of the prioritization and the new ones, yes. And also the standard versus non-standard, the timing related to standard versus non-standard. I guess, could you talk about the company's plan going forward? What steps you're proactively taking to address the new poles for the that are going in?
Okay, so for the new poles that are being created today or the poles that are replaced, we still have that issue of sending out we send out the notification that pole is being replaced and we need the transfers completed. If the transfers are done and then the pole, it's a bare pole, then we'll definitely get it removed. But if it sits there, just like how the backlog was created, we're basically creating a new backlog of preventive poles. Yeah. So I think the process moving forward, what we're proposing, which we're going to cover, is going to have to take care of both the backlog and the preventive, at the same time.
Could you elaborate? I guess you're going to cover it, so we could touch on it.
Yeah. So basically, the process that we're proposing, working more closely with the attachers and even relooking at the agreements and kind of putting more emphasis in transfer completions, it's going to impact both the backlog and preventive.
Is there a way to coordinate that so that when the new pole goes in, that the facilities are transferred at that time and the existing pole is removed?
Yeah, we try to do that on some of the more labor-intensive poles where in order for us to replace a pole, we do like work coordinations with Hawaiian Telecom and or Spectrum. Our planners will call them out, and then we do get that coordination for those type of poles. But if we're replacing 1,000 poles a year, to do that on every single one is really, it's going to require really close coordination with all the attachers out there. Yeah, and unfortunately there are times when we do send schedules out and pole replacements get canceled for whatever reason. Maybe another priority or we have a system emergency. So those pole jobs get canceled. And then, that'll just not only hamper our schedule, but if it's a coordination with Hawaiian Telecom and Spectrum, then, they're going to be impacted as well. So.
Okay. Yeah, just trying to diminish that exponential curve that you're
on. I mean, ideally, it'd be great if we had like a Superman lineman that can do everything, a company that can do everything take care of the electric and all the attachers on that pole. Yeah, yeah, we don't have that.
Could you, so on the report on page 5, the moving forward section under Hawaiian Electric plans, could you elaborate some on, you mentioned evaluating opportunities to understand the contractor unit costs and gain contractor accountability through prioritization of assigned work, how you plan to approach that? The exact rest is evaluate opportunities to understand the contractor unit cost and gain contractor accountability through prioritization of assigned work. So really, how are you, I guess, do you have information on what the contractor's unit costs are and what's the approach going forward?
Yeah, so I myself and my group, yeah, we don't have another group, I guess, within our deals with the contractor and the unit cost, the pricing. Yeah, so I don't have that particular unit cost, but in terms of working closely with getting a commitment from the contractors, it's right now, as I mentioned, the process is we give the contractor the work packets to work with, and we ask them for schedules, so they'll give us the schedules, we try to hold them as best as we can to the schedule that they give us, but we don't tell them that they have to, your schedule, we're giving you 30 work packets, so you need to complete this 30 work packets within 1 month. I mean, we don't have that control, if you will. I think that's where we need to work closely with the contractor and within the, understand the arena or I guess the responsibility that we have in terms of managing the contractor so that we can say that you have X days. I don't know if we have that. You have X days to complete these 30 work packets. Give us your schedule. And then that way, each contractor that we award the work packet to will be working off of basically the same schedule, right? You got 30 days to complete these 30. The next contractor, you got 30 days to complete this 30. But like I said, right now, the contractors are working at different paces because of their other jobs that they have. So, yeah. It's not a contract where, as Commissioner Kawai was saying, hey, here's 400 poles. This is your contract. You are obligated to complete this 400 poles. We need to relook, if we're going to be doing that, we have to relook at how we issue our contractors or create our RFPs.
And are you open to renegotiating those contracts at this time?
I would have to take that back to our team because I think right now, our contract for 2024 and 25 is still based on a unit cost type contract.
Okay. Yeah. And I guess my question is now for the various stakeholders, the telecom providers. In terms of for each, I know how clientele's already addressed this some, but do you feel you're on track to meet your commitments for removal of your facilities within the time frame, and do you have enough budget to do so?
Yes.
Okay. AT&T.
Simple answer.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then clientele.
Yes.
Okay. And then I guess, would you be able to provide a rough breakdown on the cost that you experience in terms of for standard and non-standard transfers? If you don't.
Yeah, we'd have to go check if they release that information.
You're looking for like average cost?
Average cost for each type of transfer. I guess we can circle back on that. Okay. I think in the interest of time, we have other questions, but I'll move on. I think there's other questions from PUC as well.
Thank you. Staff has additional questions. So just 2 more. The first of which is, so, we noticed Hawaiian Electric, your presentation has a few numbers that are different from the current backlog. And we're wondering if the numbers indicate a certain level of estimate, like, again, I know you folks use the word estimate in your report, but what's your confidence in the total number of double polls that there's in the backlog? And, how do you think the commission should interpret this degree of confidence?
So for question 3, that was answered and we provided the numbers in that table. I would use that as more of the best estimate that we have. The other numbers that we've been, putting out there are more high level. And the reason why we kept those numbers because of the discussions that we've been having with other parties and whatnot. We use that same number, if you will, from the high level number. But because of the exercise that, based on this question 3, all these different numbers that we provided, we actually do have spreadsheets supporting that number. So I would stick with this number in the detailed response to question 3. That's your question.
Yes, thank you.
Now for Hawaiian Telecom. So I know you folks committed to doing the 500 transfers over the 10-year period for the joint poll agreement you had with Hawaiian Electric. And we're, let's pull the question up, and we're wondering, is that included within the backlog removal plan right now?
Yeah, we actually are just shy of that number that we've completed already. And that's why we knew that our number was actually much higher than the 500. We've actually completed, I think, 450 or something so far of the backlog. Within the 5 years, so we knew the balance was much higher.
Thank you. Any stakeholders want to ask questions of each other or the commission or the CA? If you folks have questions before we go on to the next section. See no other. Oh, do you want to ask a question? Yeah. Oh, hold on.
Okay, sorry, Anand Samtani with the commission. Just a follow-up on some questions here. So the CA asked the questions about the number of customer complaints. Approximately how many of those complaints were safety related? Do you know about that? If you don't have it, you can give it to us later, send it to us later.
I'm sorry, I'm not.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Can you tell me, the CA asked about a question about complaints, number of complaints from customers. And I was just kind of wondering, of those complaints, how many of them were related to safety issues?
I don't have that number.
That's fine. You can send, you can provide us later.
Check and get back to
Okay.
you.
And then also regarding the non-transfers, I know you talked about the backlog, right? About 6,300 left, right? Based on the 2018-075 docket, right? But wasn't there, I thought there was something about the non-transfer to the 50 non-transfer transfers that was that committed to in the backlog as well? No.
Yes, so in the PUC application, as I recall, Hawaiian Electric committed to doing 1,000, a minimum of 1,000 standard transfers, and Hawaiian Telecom committed to 50, minimum of 50 per year.
Per year, right? Yeah, because I think earlier you mentioned that there was only, you only said non-standard transfers were part of the backlog. Was that there's also 50 non-standard transfers part of the backlog per year, right? Okay.
I had spoken to were basically the numbers that Hawaiian Electric was responsible for.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Debbie had
Yeah.
asked the question.
Okay. Yeah. Right. I remember she mentioned it, but I thought it was, but the 50 was still part of the total backlog. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Thanks. One couple more here. Sorry. So, the commissioners, they brought up, the past 5 years, you did about 2,800 polls. Next 5 years, you're at about 6,300. That's more double, right? The next 5 years. I know you talked about contractors' workloads, moving it from 1 to 2 years. I mean, I know you talked about other things about contracts. I'm just kind of wondering, you have to really more than double your efforts, basically. And then a lot of these contractors are committed to other projects, like say the Maui restoration. I mean, are you confident that you'll be able to make that commitment, of the 6,300, because I mean, what else are you guys doing differently? I mean, that's what I'm trying to find out. than we did before, besides the contracts and I guess with the contractors extending it from 1 to 2 years.
Yeah, so regarding the contracts, I mean, we may have to, as Commissioner Kawai mentioned, or
Yeah.
asked, we may have to look at doing a different type of contract.
Okay.
We are also, we definitely need to work more closely with the stakeholders, all the stakeholders, to ensure that the transfers are done timely. For Maui and Hawaii, for Hawaii, we do have a second contractor, so
Okay.
we do have 2 contractors there. So hopefully that'll help. But for Maui right now, I believe we only have 1 contractor yet. So we're trying to see if,
Okay.
there is a possibility of another qualified Hawaiian telecom, that contractor that is qualified to touch Hawaiian Telecom's cable.
Okay. Because I know you mentioned in your initial response, I think the November 30th response, that you need more in the budget, right? About 2.1 million to 2.5 million. And then in this one, it went up to 2.75 million to 3.15 million, right? I think. I'm just looking at the response you had in the November one.
Oh, okay, that was, yeah.
That's wondering why the additional per year 650,000 increase. I'm just curious.
Increased by 650, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so the 650, we already have the 650. So I
Right.
think the initial number that
Yeah.
we didn't include the 650.
Oh,
That
okay.
was already, it was additional above. Yeah.
Is that from the revenues from the double poles?
Correct.
Okay, and you're using all that revenues from that for the double poles, or is that?
Well, we need the 650.
Yeah, 650.
The minimum, we're getting 650 per year.
Right.
Over 10 years, which is 6.5 million, right?
Okay.
So that 650 is already, my understanding is already in the budget.
Okay.
So above that,
Right.
that's how much we need. But the number in that question 10
Yeah.
includes that 650.
Okay.
But I think when we had the meeting initially,
Right.
the number that we gave you, the lower number, was in addition to the.
Okay, yeah, that's right. So this one includes that 650 that you get revenues from the double poles. Okay, got it. And then, I know you talked about your database, right? So you have multiple databases. Are you confident that the database you have now is sufficient for you to giving an accurate count, or do you need to make any modifications or changes to your database?
If we did have a database
Yeah.
that did track double poles,
Yeah.
it'll be a lot easier.
Right.
Right now, it's, like I said, it's based on applications that go out the door,
Mhm.
responses that we get in terms from the stakeholders that they completed their transfers,
Yeah.
right? So that is a manual input into our database, as well as when the pole actually gets removed. So there is a lot of research and a lot of manual intervention that goes into our database,
Mhm.
but it's the best that we have right now, other than if we had a specific database to just track all the double poles.
Right.
Right now, all the work packets that are being created
Mhm.
are on an Excel spreadsheet.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what we're using to come up with these counts, is we have these big Excel spreadsheets that.
Are you considering maybe looking at alternatives into how you collect the data, or, track? I mean, I'm just curious because if there's going to be an ongoing effort, right?
Yeah.
You want to make it easier for you moving on forward. Yeah.
I think in the coming years, we're
Yeah.
gonna have to look at, try to figure out how.
Okay.
See, if we can gain efficiencies and other ways to track it. Because right now there is a lot of manual work.
Okay. And also of the 5,500, I guess, new double poles, you mentioned, outside of the backlog, approximately how many of those are non-standard transfers? And if you don't have it, you can give me that.
I don't
information.
have that number,
Okay.
but you could probably use that same percentage.
What percentage? Okay. Okay. That's what I was curious.
From
Okay. If
that
it was
question.
more or less.
It
Okay.
was like 65 roughly, I would say. We just did a standard and non-standard split of the remaining
Yeah.
poles, and it ranged for, I think on Oahu was like 64%, Maui was like 71, and then Hawaii Island was like 61%. So roughly around that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot different than, I know, like what Mr. Matsutomi mentioned about it, when we had estimated in the
Right.
application 95.5, right?
Yeah. Okay. Just checking. And then one more thing. I know you mentioned that you're going to give us updates like through quarterly reports, right? I think that was mentioned. Are you willing to do probably more transparency? Like the one thing I was thinking is that, you have the key performance metrics on your website. Are you willing to have something like that where, people can look on and say, okay, how many double poles in Maui? How many double poles, standard, non-standard? Would that be an option for you guys in terms of providing more visibility, especially the leads, because they're always asking, right? And we're going to tell them we have to wait for the next quarterly report before we give you an update, right? It'd be nice to have something that they can, click on and see, and even the customers too, right? To show that you're making effort as it goes down, right, over time. Just curious if that would be an option. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. That's it. But that's it for now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I had two other questions I was to ask. So for the provided cost estimates for the double pole backlog, do you have cost estimates for what it would take to get the new poles, the preventive poles, out of the ground?
No, I don't right now.
Not right
Yeah.
now. Okay. Do you estimate the cost range would be roughly the same, or?
I think on a per pole basis, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because to a contractor, whether it's a backlog or preventive, it's the same work. It's just, how we classify it as a.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then one last question in company response to question 13 at on page 2. Response to subpart C, company is mentioning the FCC's one-touch make-ready based pole attachment process. Would you be able to elaborate on the OTMR is and how it functions?
Yeah, so my limited understanding of the FCC, they have this one-touch make-ready process, but it doesn't really have to do when we do transfers or pole maintenance replacements. It's more of when attacher initiates a make-ready work, like they want to attach something to a pole.
Okay.
So an attacher say, hey, I want to attach something to this pole. And I think the company has the opportunity to hire a one-touch make-ready contractor, meaning a contractor that can go out and do everybody's transfers. Yeah.
Okay. Do you use those for existing transfers or?
So in the case where an attacher wants to attach something to a pole.
Yes.
And it's a make-ready pole, meaning the pole, in order for the attacher, in order for that attacher to attach to the new pole, that pole has to be changed out because of maybe it's undersized or there's just no room, or maybe there's positions on the pole where it has to be moved in order to accommodate the new attacher, right? If the existing attachers can't move it in a timely manner, then the company can use this one-touch make-ready process per FCC guidelines, my understanding. And then you can hire this contractor, assuming that there's a contractor that's qualified to move everybody's equipment, and it's only at the communication level, yeah, not the power space, but at the comp space. But they can go ahead and hire this contractor. But right now, when we looked at the FCC guidelines, there is nothing that can be emphasized for maintenance pole replacements, which majority of this double poles are created. It's under maintenance, and it's not an attacher initiated project.
Got it. Okay. Thanks for that distinction. All right. Thank you. I just turned off. Go ahead.
Debbie, I think you had questions.
Hi, yeah, I do. So, and as part of the questionnaire that the commission gave to Hawaiian Electric, the entities did provide, their own confirmed responses on the quantities and balances. And, yes, Hawaiian Tel did state that it had a balance of 3,000 plus, maybe 3,300 poles for all islands, where HECO did notify them that they had to remove these non-standard transfers, and it did not occur. So while we are asking Hawaiian Electric to commit that it can remove the ones in its control, how do we get Hawaiian Tel's commitment that even the 3,000 that is currently in a backlog can be removed in addition to the standard transfers, whatever equipment that they need to provide for those when HECO does the work, and also new poles that arise or are created every year, because that balance is quite a large balance.
Right, that's part of our commitment. It was a joint commitment with Hawaiian Electric at the start. So that is part of our plan to get rid of the backlog. For us, it's more resources. As I stated, the original plan was for 500 poles based on that 95% split. It's closer to the numbers that Paul gave just a few minutes ago. And so we're working with our contractors to increase their resources so that we can give them those work. We think we have a high level plan in preliminary discussions with them. The winter months affect the US mainland where a lot of the contractors can't work their normal telecom projects. So we think we can increase the amount of transfers in the winter months here in Hawaii. And we're hoping that the contractors can bring in more resources. And
Okay,
if they
thank
can
you.
accomplish that, yeah, we can get to the numbers, the 80 per month that we're trying to target.
Okay, and I only have one more question, and it's for Hawaiian Electric. Hawaiian Electric, you in your response or in earlier discussions with you, you said that you actually have additional databases that monitor or track the pole status. And for example, the PIE application, which had told us monitors all of the attachers who are not joint pole owners. And so if you have separate incongruent, like totally separate databases that track the just the non joint pole owner attachers in one database, and then the other databases that you did report in the response were for joint pole owners attachments, is that a challenge to consolidate the status? Because even if one side there's all of the joint pole owners have removed their attachments, then you need to go in another database to find out who else is attached before you send someone out to remove the pole, right? So has that been a big concern?
Yes, it has. I mean, we do have to, in that respect, the PI database that you're talking about. So the PI database was created to track the new attachments. When we became the owner of the communication space, to track the new attachments from the renters, if you will, that are being that want to attach to our pole. So that PI database has a separate purpose, I guess, if you will. But you are correct that we have to look in the PI database, plus we have to look in our joint pole database, for the owners that are attached to our pole as well. So right now, there are no plans to combine the two because it would just take a tremendous effort to combine it because of the different types of information that are being tracked. So until such time we can come up with a viable means or a more, I guess, if you're efficient way of tracking it, we are using those two separate databases.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Okay.
And just a quick follow-up on the FCC. I know you brought this up earlier. So I'm just the FCC regulates pole attachments, right? We don't. Hawaii. So in that case, if there is a complaint, have you ever filed a complaint with the FCC regarding any pole attachments? I'm just curious. And I know.
I'm not.
Oh, you're not. Okay.
With
Because I know it.
Check with PI.
Okay. Yeah, because they usually deal with the rates mainly, right? And lashing and all that. But I was wondering if they also handle other items too, if there was a complaint, by the attacher or, the utility. You're not sure.
Yeah. I'm
Okay,
not-
just curious because I just kind of wondered the role the FCC plays in terms of enforcement. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Can I refer to Ms. Whitney, who's the director of our pole infrastructure enterprise group?
Hi, thank you for the question. The FCC does have that ability to file complaints. Typically, the carriers themselves are the ones filing complaints at the FCC, not the utility owner. We are able to do that, but typically the FCC complaints are related to price and the other things. The double pole scenario or the movement of attachments from one to the other isn't typically something the FCC would see, but we have not ourselves gone to the FCC on a complaint yet. Yeah.
Okay, hearing no other questions or seeing no other hands, let's move on to the next part of the agenda. Let me share the slides.
Okay. I'm not sure, did the Consumer Advocate Commission and their stakeholders have any questions or questions regarding the responses to questions 16 and 17, which I believe were questions that were provided, the answers were provided by the stakeholder.
I think we touched on some of our questions.
Yeah.
already. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Debbie.
Hi, hi, Paul. So, earlier in the questions, Hawaiian Electric lists about maybe 20 different entities who attach to the polls. But in the end, and apparently some had claimed due to the short time to respond, you only have about 4 to 6 responders who actually signed and verified their information. Is there any plans to get the others to respond if given more time?
We can definitely reach out to them again. But just looking at the other attachers, that were on the list that we responded to, I believe in question 2, we don't really have any issues with those attachers per se in terms of timely transfers.
Okay, so they were not included for a reason because you felt either the balance was 0 or they were pretty responsive and keeping up with the balance. And so the ones who did respond is the ones that there's a balance, and that's basically why some were not there, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was basically, we did reach out to all the attachers that, we had provided the response to in question 2, but the responses that were filed to 16 and 17 were only the ones that responded to that question. The others did not respond, but as mentioned, looking at the list, I don't believe we have really any issues with the other attachers that were asked that question.
Okay, thank you. That's a good thanks for the answer.
Okay, let's
Move on to the current processes and procedures. Sorry, plan to modify the current process and procedures, noting that we are supposed to be slated to end at 11. If anyone has a hard stop, feel free to drop off. This will be on our YouTube page, so folks can look at the YouTube repository for the recording of this meeting. Go ahead, Paul.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Okay, next slide. So, taking into account, what we've discussed this morning, we came up with a plan to modify the current process and procedures to achieve the removal of double polls. I should say backlog, right? And that was our commitment of the backlog. And I understand preventive polls are an issue as well. But just addressing the backlog, right now, Hawaiian Electric, we're targeting approximately 1,300 backlog standard transport pole removals on average per year over the next 5 years, right? And again, this doesn't include the non-standard ones that Hawaiian Tel is also committing to. This is just the ones that Hawaiian Electric is responsible for, the standard backlog. Okay. We are continuing to evaluate opportunities to lower and maintain the contractor unit costs. We'll definitely consider what Commissioner Kauai had mentioned about relooking at the way we do our contracts. We also are going to further gain accountability with the contractors to place priority on the work assigned to them. As mentioned right now, we give them work packets, grouping of work packets, but we really have no control per se on how quickly they perform it, right? Because they get paid for the work they do, and the work authorization is not a promise of work. The amount of money that's given to them in the work authorization, that's not saying that's amount, it's not a guarantee of the amount of work that they're going to get. Okay. We also will continue to work more closely with Hawaiian Telecom to address the Hawaiian Telecom backlog of non-standard transfers and double pole removals. We're also looking at opportunities to amend the existing agreements with attachers and owners to facilitate timely transfers in the future. So improving response time to transfer attachments from old pole to new pole, and providing timely notification back to Hawaiian Electric when the transfers are complete. Okay. So at this time, we'll entertain any questions from the stakeholders, the commission, and consumer advocate regarding our plans to modify the current process and procedures.
Mr. Nakagawa, do you have any commitment to remove the non-backlog posts? What is your commitment?
Yeah, at this time, we don't have a commitment in terms of a time period.
What would
But
you like, Mr. Nakagawa?
I will have to take that back to see what we can accomplish within, we're gonna be given 5 years to remove that backlog.
Okay,
Excuse me, not the backlog, but.
the non-backlog.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And then Charter Spectrum, I know that Hawaiian Telecom committed to 50 non-standard transfers. Do we have a commitment from you folks on the number of non-standard transfer so you can get through?
We'd have to look at how many we have out there. I believe we've done some of them. I don't know. I think we responded with exactly how many we had. We'd have to take a look at it, how many others are out there to see sort of a timeline on commitment. And for us, we'd have to identify if there are permits that are involved. But if there are none, I don't see why we wouldn't be able to get a bunch of these done.
Before I ask my question, and I don't have our counsel in the room, so I'll direct this to those who are counsel, I mean, Rich and Mickey. Where are we going to formalize this? Because we're talking, there was a docket. We're kind of mixing the two, right? This is the reso didn't, right? The reso called for a new proceeding, but we're trying to make commitments now to kind of alter what was. My understanding is, right, alter what was committed in 2018-0075. So are we talking reopening that, or, I mean, what's your understanding, I mean, from the attorneys in the room?
Chair, it does sound like some of these commitments would be needed in a docket. And whether it can be done by reopening 2018-0075 or a new docket, it sounds like the full participation of all the attachers is absolutely necessary. And that would also be a way to get appropriate protective orders in place to make sure that all necessary information is provided.
I don't know, Rich, if you want to. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Okay. I just wanted to make sure because, right, like I said in the beginning, right, we didn't want to open a new docket just for this. But then we're starting to get to, right, looking at what were the previous commitments and what should be the commitments today going forward for the next 5 years. So I'm not sure how we're going to deal with that, but yeah, I just thought I'd put it out there. Thanks.
Okay. Do you have a question?
Or did you not put down your hand?
Hi, Andrew. I have my hand up, but yeah, I'll go when I'm supposed to be able to go. Whenever
It's
you guys, yeah.
it's now our time to go, Debbie. If you would like to ask your question,
Okay.
I have a list of questions too.
Yes, I do. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'll try to keep this one short. So I actually reviewed the agreements of course, you have agreements for all of your regular attachers, but you also had the agreement that occurred with the transfer of ownership from Hawaiian Tel to HECO. And now the thing that the question I want to ask is, even if you improve these agreements, where currently it already says that if they don't transfer according to the requirements of the 90 days or whatever specified, it's considered a material breach of contract. If that already states that, and yet there's not enough in there to penalize or do anything to get the attachers to do the transfers, then how would you change your agreements unless you had a way to actually track the 90 days, the 60 days, and everything else to make sure that you have proof that they did not meet the response times? So it's just something to think about, that if you are going to redo the contracts, they should be able to be actionable, or that with the databases you have, you will be able to track it, or you won't have much to stand on to say that they did breach the contract. At least I'm not a lawyer, but I'm reading it right now, or I read it weeks ago, and yes, it should be improved, but how you improve it, you should consider if you can get that data, the tracking data throughout the next 5 years, or you won't be able to, I guess, really have the penalties materialize. That was just my comment on that one. Okay, sorry, Andrew.
Oh, sorry. So I guess for my questions, we're really interested, Chair Sunchin, wants to get resolution on this, and Commissioner Kwai is also of the same mind, as well as Commissioner Yost. But, if we do kind of provide some type of assistance to the stakeholders, not just Hawaiian Electric, but to the stakeholders of some type of assistance, would the stakeholders be willing to somehow provide a guarantee or some type of agreement with the commission and the other stakeholders, as well as Hawaiian Electric, that you'll get a certain count by a certain date? I mean, that understanding where we can get to when we can get to zero is, I think, very important. And if that's okay, let's start with Charter, because they're right across the room.
Yeah, we'll get back to you on that, but we'll review.
Same answer.
Oh, yes. I mean, I'll have to take it back, but we're definitely committed to addressing, as I mentioned, and entertaining any opportunities to better this problem that we have, to eliminate the problem.
The same position, maybe workshops or something between everyone to come up with some new procedures and better ways of doing certain things. But I think it'll take a collaborative effort.
Sorry. Oh, sorry, Shannon.
And I'm not, I think we're going to take it back to the team, as Paul stated, but because the legislature has highlighted this, I don't know if checking in this type of status meeting may be a good idea again, just to keep the commissioners informed about the progress of the parties. And it just gives us an opportunity to let you guys know, hey, this is where we are. This 5 years is going to come quick. And we just appreciate the commission, bringing this and all of us together to address it, because we're going to go back to the legislature and they're going to ask the same questions. So I look forward to the report. But if we can let them know that there's going to be an ongoing check-in with all stakeholders, I think that would give them some reassurance. So that's just one idea. Thank you.
Along the lines of coming together to develop new policies, procedures, I'm interested if there's any discussion on workforce development or training opportunities. I'm struck by the statement that there's maybe no ready solution to the resource constraints of contractors, and interested if there's anything we can do to work on that.
On top of that, I'm gonna assume it's a union shop, by BW, right? I mean, that's been one of their things too. I think spoken to at least Leroy, which is your guys, right? That right, they're looking at apprentices, apprenticeships, etc. Right? I mean, they're trying to develop their workforce, but then right, there's the other two IBW locals, right? So I think they're going to have to be involved as well if we're looking at workforce development. Let me, Shannon, thanks for the idea. I think at the end of the day, the check-ins are good. I think, right, my concern is how do we formalize it, right? And is it, like I asked before, right? If it's a cleaner way to open a docket just to update, right? 2018-0075, right? But I mean, that would come like we're not going to open it and then still have these check-in. Like I think we should have the check-ins, and then at some point, how do we formalize what everybody understands to be the path forward, right? And it could come right as an application, and everybody steps, right? So it makes the commissions and the consumer advocates, right, review process a little better, right? Because we're all in the check-ins as well, so we understand what's going to come in. So it makes the decision-making process a little better. It's just, right, how do we formalize it so that everyone, right, kind of like signs on, and the commission can say, yes, everybody signed on. All right, so, right, I'm just trying to think this through and how it's going to work.
Before we close, anyone have any other questions regarding, the future and modifying the current process and procedures?
No further.
You,
No further questions.
you don't have any questions? Okay. Okay, so let's close then. Thank you everyone, Hawaiian Electric and other stakeholders. This was a very important meeting to have you in attendance, and we want to close to hearing from our commissioners with any closing remarks they may have.
Maybe one thing to think about, right? If we can all commit to a time frame in which we're going to try to get this done as well, that we can, let the legislature know, like we're all example, right? We're all committed to getting this kind of finalized in the next 6 months, right? And we put that into the report already. And we got a couple of weeks, right, to finalize the report to the legislature. So if that kind of commitment can come in to, to the commission, right, that as we propose, right, a periodic working group or whatever we want to call it, and then when we commit, right, in 6 months, right, by June 30th, right, we will have, right, the formalization part all done, right, and we move forward, right. We don't, because I always fear when I tell the legislature we're going to open a docket, in their mind it's already a year process, right. That's what they think, right. So I want to give them that assurance that we're all working together, right, and we're going to commit to getting it done, right, formalizing the new plan going forward for the next 5 years, right, by X date. So if you guys can think about that, and then if we can get at least an informal commitment for everyone to say we're going to do it in 6 months or whatever it's going to be, then we can let the legislature know.
And just to bootstrap on what Commissioner Asuncion just said, public safety obviously is the legislature's chief concern here. And I think making specific commitments on how we deal with the priority polls and how quickly, I mean, I was heartened to hear of the 24-hour response time that is, I guess, somewhat standard in the industry for when they do receive notice that there is an especially dangerous pole situation. But making a more explicit commitment to that and explaining also better detail, better information as to how many of those are still waiting to be resolved. You mentioned that earlier, Hiko. So focusing on that, getting specific commitments on that will help the legislature and the public.
So I just wanted to add that, during the testimony, during the ledge in the beginning of the session that we're near the end, they did mention after the report, they might want an information briefing, just to let you know. So you might be there too, responding to their questions. So just make sure that commitment, you think about it now, before we get to that point. Yeah, it'd be good to have that in hand. Thanks.
And with that, okay.
I think just at the end of the day, safety being number one concern, we do have to think about how to get the total backlog, the total number of polls down, and to keep that at the forefront of our mind, not just the backlog. Thank you.
Okay, let's end the meeting. Thank you everyone for coming. We really appreciate everyone's time. Mahalo.
Nice job. I don't know about that. We'll see. Nah, you did.